Friday, September 27th, 2019. It is 1 p.m. Thank you for all those who are in attendance. My name is Paul Mills. I am president of the Rails board, and I am calling this meeting to order at 1 p.m. Emily, would you kindly call roll?
Sure. Dave Barry. Sue Busenbark.
Here.
Michael Campbell.
Here.
Hallie Cox.
Here.
Selena Gomez-Belois.
Here.
Gwen Gregory.
Here.
Diane Hollister.
Here.
Jay Caston.
Here.
Sarah McCone Chase.
Here.
Paul Mills.
Here.
Jenna Nemec Luisi. Scott Poynton.
Here.
Dee Reynolds.
Here.
Nadia Shake.
Here.
Thomas Stagg.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. And that is quorum. All right, next we go on to recognition of guests and announcements, and we're going to do guest introductions and public comments in the same time. At the same time, why don't we start here in Coal Valley?
My name is Stacy Palmisano. I'm from Rails.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Sharon Swanson, Rails.
Deirdre Brennan, Rails.
Jim Krieger, Rails. Dan Bostrom, Rails.
Emily Feister Rails.
Jane Class, Rails.
Ryan Hebel, also Rails.
Thank you all. Any public comment then here in Coal Valley? If not, why don't we move on to Bolingbrook, which looks dark, but just in case, is there anyone sitting there in the dark that they would like to, admit to? No, looking like not. All right, how about Burr Ridge? Everyone please introduce themselves in Burr Ridge.
Diana Rush, Rails. Ann Slaughter, Rails.
Thank you both. Any public comment from Burr Ridge? No, let's move on to East Peoria. East Peoria, please say hello to us.
Good afternoon, Kendall Orison, Rails.
Anna Hudson Rails.
Robert Morgan, Rails.
Nobody
Welcome.
else is here.
Any public comment, Kendall, in East Peoria?
No.
Thank you, Kendall. Illinois State Library.
Greg McCormick.
Gwen Harrison.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Gwen. Any public
Hello.
comment? Hello.
No comment.
No comment. Thank you. Now we have the Carroll Stream Public Library Business Office, which is very, very specific. Hi, Nadia. Is anyone there in the room with you?
Besides my 4-year-old coloring, no.
Is there any public comment?
No.
Oh, I'd be fine with that. Ryan, do we have the phone connected too? Or is it just the sites?
Yes.
Is there anyone on the phone then who would like to speak up? Any public comment from the phone? All right, it looks like that's it. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. One thing I would like to note, we do have a speaker today, Julie Tappendorf, who has some different schedules she needs to meet. She is currently scheduled to speak towards the end of the meeting under board development, but with the board's forbearance, I would like to invite Julie to speak when she actually arrives in Burr Ridge. She's caught in traffic right now. If we can just have her slot into the agenda when she arrives, after we finish a topic before we start the next one, so she can do her presentation for us, and then she can leave to make another meeting that she must make. So with that caveat, may I have a motion to and a second to modify the order of the agenda items as I just described for our guest Julie Tappendorf?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you both. Any discussion about that? Maybe there's some discussion, but no, I think that's just some background. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right, the agenda as modified is adopted. We do have a little bit of background noise. Is it Burr Ridge?
Sorry,
That's it's okay, Burr Ridge.
I'll hold
You weren't
still
called
now.
out though specifically, just
Two.
oh gosh. All right, moving along. We have approval of the Rails board minutes, financial reports, and expenditures. The first item we have up is the Rails board minutes, the August 23rd, 2019 regular meeting. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes of that August 23rd meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Michael. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of those minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, our minutes are approved. We are just moving right along. Next, we have our usual guest speaker of Jim to deliver the Rails financial report.
Thank you. In the board packet is the Rails financial report for the month of August, which is the second month of our fiscal year. The highlights are our unassigned general fund cash balance was 14.8 million, and that would fund an estimated 15.7 months of operations. Through our cash and investments did decrease a bit as we received no area per capita grant payments. But during August, but in September, we got our first payment from the our federal LSTA portion of a little over 417,000. And we're expecting the second part of it, which will be 1.5 million shortly. It hasn't been approved, released yet, but it's in it's in the process. So our general fund revenues through August were $1.7 million below budget, and primarily from the non-receipt of the grant revenues, which will start to improve beginning in September. Investment income is almost 72,000 through the first 2 months. It was 4,523 above budget. That's about the same variance as it was for July, and interest rates did decrease during the month. The Federal Reserve lowered their interest rates by 0.25% that month, but I think it's going to be steady from now on for a while. There was some dissension to even lowering it this last time, but that's only a forecast or opinion, and who knows? It's very hard to forecast that. Our expenditures were general fund expenditures were 250,000 below budget. Most of that was contractual services and library materials, which was mostly the reimbursable type. So the revenue was also under budget. So it's kind of a wash on the bottom line in personnel expenditures. We hadn't hired 3 budgeted positions through August, but have since hired at least 2 of them, and I believe a third was hired late in the month, but not starting for a few months. And there was minimal activity in special revenue, and no financial activity within the capital projects fund through August. That will change dramatically, especially for the capital projects fund, as we purchased our 7 vehicles in September, delivery vehicles, and that will take up the entire year's budget. That's what was allocated, but we were able to make the purchase. And supposedly they get much higher gas mileage than what we have now, so we'll be watching that. So hopefully our fuel expenditures will be a bit better. The special revenue fund, there hasn't been too much activity, but that will pick up with the L2 grant activity when we reward that contract and get that started. And it may dramatically pick up if we are awarded the census grant. And our application was $1.3 million, and that's not even in the budget. Delivery is under budget so far, as our LSAP expenditures. Are there any questions I can answer?
Any questions for Jim? Thank you, Jim, and I think we can move on to the expenditure report.
And the expenditures are listed at the end of the financial report, and the expenditures for August were $751,165.96. Are there any questions on the detail?
All right, hearing no questions, may I have a motion for approval of the check voucher / register for August of 2019? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further questions or discussion about this? If not, Emily, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Sue Busenberg,
Oh, yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Ellie Cox.
Yes.
Selena Gomez Belois,
Yes.
Gwen Gregory,
Yes.
Diane Hollister, Jay Caston,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Scott Pointon,
Yes.
Dee Reynolds,
Yes.
Nadia Shake,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
You did change the agenda.
You just wanted to have this first. Yeah, okay, all right. All right, well, thank you, Jim. We are going to move on to reports. We are on item 7.1, report from the Rails president. I do not have a report at this time, so we will move on to our committees. And next up, we have the Advocacy Committee and Michael.
We did meet. We met on Wednesday of this week, and we discussed our strategic focus for this year. And our strategic focus, we have not fleshed out, but we did just agree on some major topics, which are academic libraries, diversity in the census, school libraries, trustee outreach, and minimum wage for the libraries within Rails, which is going to be our key focus for the advocacy committee, and then our next meeting. So that is kind of an overview of what we discussed.
Thank you, Michael. Does anyone have any questions for Michael on his report? If not, we move on to the Consortia Committee. Consortia Committee has not met since we last met. And it's me again, the Executive Committee. Executive Committee has not met, so that makes that for two really easy reports. Gwen, the Policy Committee.
The policy committee has not met. Trying very hard to, but it has not met yet.
All right.
Next time we'll have a report. You have another doodle poll in your email right now.
I just filled it out.
I know, I understand. Sometimes even our internal committees, we have a hard time finding times that work for everybody. Oh, all right. Well, Resource Sharing Committee, Jane.
Yes.
There's Jane.
Resource Sharing Committee met on September 9th, and we had quite a good discussion. The committee recommended for board approval a change to the committee's charge. That's later on our agenda today, so I won't go into that right now. We also had a good discussion and talked about ideas for fiscal 2020 goals for the committee. A lot of good ideas. I would say most of those centered around marketing and education in various aspects about resource sharing, both to libraries, to patrons through their libraries, and also to funders and decision makers, even beyond the library, such as school administrator and school boards. Quite a lot of discussion about school libraries. So I'm sure that will be a focus of the next meeting as well. The committee also passed a motion recommending that Rails develop a letter template that libraries can use to protest the planned Macmillan embargo on purchase of new ebooks. So we have developed that. The committee's had an opportunity to provide some feedback via email to me, and that will be made available to libraries through e-news next week.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Any questions for Jane about the Resource Sharing Committee? Sounds like it a really productive meeting, Jane.
was
So,
good.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And last but not least, although alphabetically we have the Universal Service Committee and Sue and Deirdre.
Survey was sent out.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I read about that in your report.
Yep.
And it sounded like, well, as you probably read, 58%. of
Yeah, we had a really
libraries.
good
That was good.
return rate.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then going to review the
Yes.
results.
We're hoping to get a meeting scheduled in November
Okay.
of the committee because there has been a fair amount of activity, but we were trying to get the policy committee first, but anyway, it's been, yeah, I'm sure you all understand. So, but we will be meeting hopefully in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. All right, any questions for Sue about the Universal Service Committee? No? All right, thank you. We now move on to Rails reports and the Rails monthly report, and I will turn it over to Deirdre.
Thank you. Well, I could report on the food I ate in Italy, if you would like, but I won't. So anyway, yes, I did have a lovely vacation, but certainly things proceeded at Rails, as you can tell from the this month at Rails report. And I do want to thank the entire Rails team, especially Jane and Jim and Karen Goyer, for actually getting the census grant out the door. It was quite the job. And they were not the only ones who helped, but Grant Halter also helped a bit, quite a bit, but but that was a big focus of activity, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail. In terms of the publisher situation, there is ALA has established or developed an eBooks for All petition, which is on their website. We can send a link to that. It'd be great if everybody could sign that. The Laboratory for Applied Spatial Analysis is pretty close to completing their work on phase 2 of analyzing where the delivery hubs should be. So we're expecting to be able to report back to you about that in a bit. In terms of the census, I would say that, as Jane said, we asked for
just over $1.3 million.
Right. So we should hear in a week, which is really quick, but everything about this is quick. We did end up having about 25 agencies indicate interest in being subrecipients. If we get the money, we'll end up pushing a lot of it out, about 80% of it out to subrecipients. Includes libraries, county departments, city departments, cities. We have, there is money in the grant budget, as you can well imagine, to hire a person to manage the project. We did have some interviews this past week because we want to be ready to go if we do get the money. So yes, it was a huge job, and we are now at the point of wondering whether we actually want to get the money or not, because that was nothing compared to what it will be like to actually do the project. But I think it was a great proposal. I think we were certainly not the only applicant in the collar counties, but I think we have a great track record, so we'll just see. So anybody have any questions about that, about the census at this point? So we'll let you know as soon as we hear. Then I did include some more articles, some recent articles related to the Macmillan embargo and other just sort of publisher news in general. A post from Readers First about Amazon and Macmillan, Andrew Albanese, who writes for Publishers Weekly, in his article. And then a letter or an article about Biblioteca calling out Amazon for meddling in the library ebook market. You probably recall that when I talked about this last month, I did talk about Amazon being, one of the big issues that doesn't always get mentioned. That publishers seem to they're more willing to blame libraries for problems than they are to call out Amazon. So just trying to keep everybody, bless you, just trying to keep everybody up to date on this issue. We are having a meeting on Monday with a number of our ebook consortia to talk about this whole topic and to see what else we might be able to do. That is my report. Any questions?
Deirdre, Jay at Burr Ridge.
Yes, hi, Jay.
Hi there. The study that LASA is doing, and I'm not on the right page right now, and the study that this other gentleman, Pramvitz, I believe, is doing,
Yes.
are they collaborating or is there going to be duplicate work being done? How are we separating the two entities from each other? Or are they completely working on different aspects or components of delivery?
Right, right. Great question. Thank you, Jay.
Thank
So LASA is looking pretty specifically at the Illinois Library Delivery Service, ILDS, as well as where our hubs should be located for optimum service. Greg Pronovitz is a retired regional or system administrator from Massachusetts who has specialized in delivery over his career. He's been doing a lot of work since he retired for different states and systems, notably New York State, the city of New York, looking at how to improve delivery. His focus is not on mapping, it's on the more, the delivery itself. And specifically, we have asked him to look at outsourcing and insourcing. As you all know, we did outsource delivery in the old Burr Ridge area, as well as the Wheeling hub a few years ago to CTL, the courier. And it was just time for us to evaluate how that's going. And so we've asked him to do that, and also to look at the potential of outsourcing other areas, other hubs. So he's not looking at the mapping, he's looking at the other aspects of delivery. However, he will definitely be talking with the folks at LASA for sure, because they have so much data that will be helpful to him. And I think he's actually seen a number of the reports already, but he is not a mapping guy. He's the rest of it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Deirdre, back to the Amazon ebook thing. I think it was last month you reported that Amazon has directly signed a couple of authors that.
Dean Koontz being the chief.
Right. So
One, yes.
I think if Amazon and the publishers were aligned to, sort of adversarially against libraries, it's a daunting thing. But
yes.
Do you know, is anybody talking in the library world about, hey, maybe the publishers are going to get scared enough by Amazon that they will team up with us? It'll be libraries and publishers versus Amazon. Is there any talking about capitalizing on that?
No, everybody seems to be afraid of Amazon, including libraries.
Right.
Or I think libraries are afraid of losing access, losing the Kindle. That was what I picked up mostly from this article from Andrew, which, Mitchell Davis, our Biblio Board's partner, used to work at Amazon, right? Yeah. And, or did he used to work at Google? Or maybe both. Anyway, he,
Let's call him.
yeah. Anyway, he has said, and I may have said this last month, I don't remember, but several months ago, he said to me that that Amazon is going to really damage ebook lending in libraries. This was like maybe even a year ago, and I said, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. And I really didn't have any clue. Now, with all this been happening, it kind of seems sort of course, what you're saying is true, because that Amazon is scaring publishers into not, selling ebooks to us. And of course, Amazon won't sell ebooks to us either.
Right.
So
I'm just thinking publishers have almost more to lose than we do, because if we lost all access to e-content, we still exist.
Right.
But if authors start getting published directly by the retailer,
yes,
publishers will not exist. So
right.
How do we drive a wedge between those two?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. But I haven't heard anybody else say it, so go Scott.
I'll write a letter to somebody.
I think it's something to put out there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Any other further questions for Deirdre? If not, thank you for another good report, ma'am.
Of course.
And Julie just arrived.
And Julie just arrived. Shall we do Julie, or should we go to the Illinois State Library first?
I don't know.
Actually, why don't we do the? We'll wait for people to. Yeah.
No, go ahead with Julie. That's fine.
You sure? Are you sure? Thank you, Greg. That's really gracious of you. Julie, how are you?
I'm good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah, so actually, Julie,
sorry I
why
was
don't
late.
you No, actually, things worked out relatively well. Julie, if you'd like to go ahead and deliver your presentation, that would be great.
Sure. So nothing really formal, but Dee had asked me to talk about confidentiality and privacy, some of the questions that have been coming up from members lately, probably over the last year, but at least seems to be more questions, and all of the different ways that our patrons and users' privacy rights or confidentiality protections can be implicated. So I wanted to start first by just talking about our state statute, and all the states have some confidentiality statute. Ours is, I would say it's broad in some respect, but when you read the how it's applied and what it actually targets, it's actually fairly narrow in scope compared to what we think about with the ALA and their Bill of Rights and some of the other privacy policies that we've seen. That the actual statutory language is more narrow. So what does the law prohibit in Illinois? It prohibits the release of registration and circulation records. That's it. It's not about every single aspect of a patron or user's experience or activities or events at libraries. It doesn't talk about images, and it doesn't address issues such as security videos and other privacy and confidentiality concerns that I've heard. But it relates to the documents or the information that they provide to get a library card, and also which is the registration records, and then also their circulation records. So what they're borrowing and specific to the materials that they may be taking out. It is fairly limited. In what I hear from a lot of our clients and from members is a much broader, I guess, interpretation or expectation of the library's responsibilities in the privacy realm. And what I would say is there are two ways to look at this. One is the purely legal aspect of confidentiality, which is the Library Records Confidentiality Act, which is limited to those records. And then the more broad the policy of libraries in general to protect their patrons' privacy and their activities and what they do and what they check out, what events they might sign up for, and their personally identified information. And they are different, and sometimes they seem to be meshed together where a member expresses concerns about potentially violating the law when they get a FOIA request, let's say for a security video, well, we can't give out a security video of our library because it would violate the Library Records Confidentiality Act. And that's not necessarily the case. Again, where the law says you have to protect the registration and circulation records. You may have broader policy protections, but how you interpret let's say that request for security cameras is not likely to fall under the law, and then it's a FOIA issue, and there's the meshing between that law and the broader policy of protecting patron privacy. So some of the, and I mentioned FOIA, some of the other issues to think about in the privacy and confidentiality realm, beyond just the one law, which protects the registration and circulation records, is the Freedom of Information Act. It doesn't provide protections per se for privacy, but it does contain particular exemptions to protect records that might fall into the definition of private information, or might, if they were released, be an invasion of personal privacy. That's not a absolute privacy protection like the LCRA. It is a optional exemption. None of the exemptions under FOIA are mandatory, but I would suspect that with the emphasis in libraries in protecting patron privacy, that you would take advantage of those exceptions if somebody requested a record and it fell within one of those exemptions. And then, of course, FOIA does expressly exempt records that would fall under the LCRA. So LRCA, that there's not an issue with trying to balance the two, because FOIA already contains that exemption if it falls under that. Some of the other legal issues, I mean, there is and it's not often cited, there's a common law right to privacy, and there's a legal right for somebody to challenge release of information that might be an invasion of personal privacy. It's very rare. I can't even think of the last case that I've seen where somebody would claim something like that. Typically, it would have to fall under some other statute. Minors' rights to privacy are not fleshed out as well as we would think. Surprisingly, in Illinois, juvenile arrestees and juveniles that have been arrested or convicted have a higher privacy rights than juvenile witnesses or victims in crimes. Not that that will come up very often in the library realm, but it's always a surprise. Some of the other issues that I wanted to touch on that have come up, I mean, I mentioned the ALA Bill of Rights. If you're curious about some of the current issues in privacy and confidentiality that are coming up, you can probably find some resolution or policy on ALA's website that addresses it. There's a lot of materials. There were a couple of things I hadn't even seen before when I was preparing for this. They have, if you haven't seen it, adopted a resolution specific to one of the issues that Dee asked me to talk about, which is the self-service holds. So the idea that the library has the bookshelf or shelving system where that's where the self-service hold section where people can come in. They've put materials on hold. They can come in and just pick it up. It's got their name on it and the materials are out there. And the ALA has passed a resolution of caution to library members about the potential that would violate the Privacy Bill of Rights and the library's expectation that they would protect patron privacy. When I look at something like and I don't know how many of the members are actually using this, but when I look at this purely from the legal standpoint, not from the ALA privacy standpoint, but from our statute that protects library records, the fact that there are materials out in the open that are clearly marked with a patron's name and the materials are able to be viewed and people can walk by and see it seems to be a clear violation of our own statute on that protects the confidentiality of circulation records. I'm not sure how you can get around that if you use the patron's name and put the materials out there. I haven't seen an actual reported decision on this. I mean, there have been challenges. I know some people have expressed concerns, and patrons have expressed concerns with libraries that not allow it as an option. I think there's a big difference between that and mandating that is the only way basically that you can pick up a hold is through the self-service. Before I move on to some of the other things, I wanted to see if there were any questions about that specific issue. Do you raise that? I don't know if it's something that's been brewing with members, if this is something that's been on a listserv, or if it's something maybe that board members have raised.
It came up, and Greg can speak to this as well. This came up specifically from a patron of the Chicago Public Library. This is a service that many libraries offer. Just to clarify, in my experience, there may be the patron's name, or there may be there's more often not the full name, but an abbreviation or a code. Mm-hmm. And also the libraries, we're good with codes, but and also you cannot see the actual title of the book just by walking by. So I don't know if that helps in this case. I'd be interested in your opinion, Julie, but this is definitely a very popular and widely used method of patrons getting their books. And so that's where it came from.
Yeah, and that's what I'd heard as well, that it's a staffing issue, one, from just not having to have the extra staffing to process this. But more than that, I think you will have patrons that prefer it. I mean, there will be some that say, I want to run in and just grab what I need and move on and not have to go through waiting in line and all of that. So some patrons be very much in favor of this and streamlining that process. I think there are ways to do this that would not offend our own statute protecting the circulation records. And I've heard of all sorts of different ways to do it. You could put paper around or put the materials in a bag where it's not visible. You could use codes instead of the full name. So then if the materials were shown and it was the code, even, partial library card code or some other aspect where people wouldn't know that. I mean, the point is not that you can't know a patron's name or you can't know what book. It's putting the two together. And so covering up the book so the people walking by can't see it. Partial names, I'm not sure. I suppose it depends on how partial it is. You would think that it would be enough of the name so the person would know it was theirs, but not so much that other people might walk by and be able to easily figure out that, oh, that's my neighbor so-and-so, and look what they're reading and what they've checked out. So I don't think that the practice itself is the problem. I think it's how it's implemented, but I do think it's something that libraries need to be cognizant of. One, because the ALA is taking it seriously because it's becoming so widespread, and they've specifically adopted a resolution. And again, that's not binding. It's not the law. But B, we do have a law in Illinois that protects the confidentiality. I certainly wouldn't want a library to end up and frankly, there's not an enforcement mechanism under the law. It's not clear what the penalty would be, but just from a public relations aspect, it wouldn't be great to have that challenge. So I think there are ways to do it. And I think maybe thinking through that, the membership and the board, thinking through, are there recommendations that you might consider if this is becoming more widespread, or maybe most, if not all libraries are already doing it, looking at a best practices for that for in Illinois, not to put libraries in that position of having a patron complain about it or having some Attorney General come in and say, hey, this is clearly in violation of state law.
I have a question. Julie, we don't do this so am I understanding right that the materials that are set out are already checked out to the patron?
No.
No, okay.
They're not.
I
Yeah,
guess I was
I think-
confused when you said that, this was a streamlined way to not have to stand in lines, but they still have to stand in line to check out, right?
No.
Self-check.
Yeah.
Oh, a self-check, okay. So what
Yeah.
would prevent somebody else from taking somebody else's material?
The book's on hold for that person. They can't check it out.
Okay, so the only person that could check it out would be the one that's.
The card that reserved that book.
Okay, okay.
So I have a question for you. This summer, the governor signed a child privacy act protecting child data, and how schools and entities who have any kind of data for children relate with that data. How does that, how are libraries dealing with data for kids under 18? So how are they protecting that
I
data?
don't have the practical yet. I don't have any good, and maybe that's something that some of the board members have specifically experienced. Certainly, there will be practices and procedures that will potentially need to change. Although my expectation is that most libraries compared to other governmental entities are already taking care to protect privacy of not just their minors, but of anyone's personal identifying information. So I'm not sure that there will be a huge change in practice and policies, but I would ask if there are any board members that have done anything and implemented anything or considered whether there are changes that are needed. And maybe that's something that we can follow up on.
Well, I would say in my past experience in a public library that can be a tricky thing to explain because parents want access to their children's checkout information. They can't understand why they can't have it.
Especially when they're being held financially.
Yes.
You're responsible for it.
For the account, right?
It's very, yeah, so that's, and I don't think there's any, I don't know how you can do anything about that legally, frankly. I think that's just something that libraries have to explain. And some parents get it and some are angry. And it's not just with children, it's with husbands, wives, whatever.
For sure.
So Julie, I have a question. So you said, I think, that if patrons weren't required to pick up their holds this way, if there was if it were an opt-in, opt-out, that would be okay then?
Well, who has the right, and this is the way we look at it from a legal perspective, who has the right to challenge a violation of the Confidentiality Records Act? Who would be, and it would be the person whose rights were violated. And if they signed some waiver that said that I'm opting into having this, I'm not sure what their challenge would be later. We think about that a lot with releases. We want to release when somebody comes to an event or an activity, some potential for injury or, to protect the library or park district and school. It would be similar here. So that somebody says, I understand what my rights are under the Library Confidentiality Act, but I'm okay with, and because in essence, they're saying I'm okay with opting into this type of procedure. I don't think that's as good as coming up with some other procedure that simply, and I'm not saying not doing it at all, but either covering up the materials in some way or not putting the name on the materials and using maybe using a code. From a practical perspective, when you notify somebody that their hold is ready for pickup, is it automated, or is it an email or a text that could include a code, and then this is the code that you need to look for when you pick it up? I mean, these are the things that I wonder if there's a way to put that practice in place where there's not the tying of the name with the material.
It's all over the map, I would say, depending on the technology at a library, but oftentimes it is automated, yes.
Okay.
I would say, I would just add to that thought, you know, there's only really 2 or maybe 3 viable, you know, vendors out there for integrated library systems. So we're all kind of reliant on the systems that we, you know, have paid for. And I don't know that that's technologically built into those right now. But the other thought that popped into my head a few minutes ago is whatever code we may come up with, unless it's a completely randomly assigned number, is a code that someone might know, like or be able to figure out. If it's the first 3 letters of a person's last name and the first 3 letters of the month they were born in, and then the last 4 digits of their phone number, well, a person's neighbor could know all those things. Their spouse is definitely going to know all those things. So short of it being a randomly assigned like 6-digit number, there's not really a code that we can absolutely say no one else is going to know who that is.
And then the expectations on the patron then to know that code or have it with them so they can find the materials that they've checked. It's too much.
Right.
Yeah, heck of a customer service issue.
Oh my God.
It'd be like remembering another password.
Right.
Right.
A 60
A password that changes with each item that you requested is not the same password.
Yeah, that changed each time.
Well, that would, I think that would be practically very difficult. You know, I think back, and this was a long time ago, but when I was in law school and they used to post grades, and they posted all the grades out in public where everyone could see them, and all the students were assigned a code, and that's how you knew which grade wasn't disclosed. I think there are ways to do this and not implicate the act. But it is more work. It's more administrative work, whether it's every patron gets assigned a code, and that's their code. And one of the board members mentioned, you know, the expectation that the patron's going to remember what. I agree. It isn't great. I don't think any system is perfect, but I do think it's important that members understand the risk of putting out materials, uncovered materials out in the open with the name of the patron on it. It's pretty clearly violates our state statute that says that we will keep information about a patron's circulation records confidential. And I don't know how we do that if the books are out there for public inspection and view with the name attached to it. So while yes, it's an administrative issue and a burden, I think that there are ways to address it. And I think that at the very least, the members need to understand that. I don't see any way around a full name with the materials in view, not implicating the statute.
So Deirdre and Julie, the issue, I think, actually Greg too, the issue with Chicago Public Library that came to the fore, was that this year? Yeah. So this year it came. They had the books in public, and I think they had full patron name. Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct.
Yep.
They did a procedural change where, you know, they still, I understand they still have self pickup of holds, but they changed it from full name to
First 3 letters of the last name.
First 3 letters of the last name. And is that all the information that's there then?
That's all the information.
That's there, yeah.
That's not good.
So it would be like, for me, it would be BOS.
Yeah.
Right, I've
Which
heard
I
that, and Chicago's not the only one doing that. So it might be 3 letters of the first name and 3 letters of the last name, or just the first name and the initial. And I think in Chicago, with the number of people in Chicago, that probably would work. If we're in a very small library in a very small town, you know, how many people might that be? I think that it's one way, it may not be a perfect way. And it may not be a one size fits all for every community or every library.
It's an issue too. This is an issue that we've spent a lot of time here at the State Library on recently. Some members of the Illinois Library Association or Public Policy Committee may be hearing more about this too. And Dee was meeting with the senators when legislation was introduced last year and then put on hold, and that was Senate Bill 585, if anyone would like to look at that. I don't know that this issue is totally going away. From a legal perspective, our attorneys who have reviewed this here at the State Library are in exact agreement with Julie on this. So they even actually did some recent tests of some libraries for their own material, and then suggested that family members do the same at different libraries, and complete names were utilized. So that does pose some challenges still that, you know, best practices need to be put in place on this issue. I think, you know, as far as truncating the name, and I think the complete last and first name are a huge issue. If you get to people with obviously a 3-letter last name, you still have a technical violation of the law. So libraries are going to have some procedure in place on how they address that. This, of course, too, I think the whole recent LinkedIn Learning issue, that was an issue regarding privacy as well. Where was the liability in that? Was it really the library violating that law? So we haven't really discussed that here, but I did have some questions from a couple of member libraries from Rails on that issue as well. So this is really a timely discussion and really quite a good discussion today. So thank you.
I thought the same thing Greg just mentioned with the three letters,
Yeah.
and name tags. I'm like, ooh, D.
Yeah.
Like we have 2 examples of a 3-letter first name and 1 example of a 3-letter last name here at this one table.
Right.
So that would be a problem.
And on the other hand, libraries have to be very concerned about, you know, this is a very popular service where it's been implemented. And in thinking about the Chicago Public Library on any given day, they had over 25,000 items on those shelves in their system.
Wow.
So assuring if you have the 3-letter last names pulled, that's a challenge for a library when you have that scale of an operation for that service alone.
It's very depressing. It is, you know, it's, I mean, we have this successful service, and you know, I have to say 2 things. When I was in Oak Park, we did this, and we covered the books with a full sheet of paper, and we got into tremendous trouble because of the amount of paper that we were wasting. So we had to stop using the paper.
Sure.
And the other thing I have to say is that I think that, this is my personal opinion, I think that most people don't even think about privacy when they think about this at all. And they have I mean, maybe they have privacy concerns about Facebook and the fact that, you know, Facebook probably now knows that we're having this conversation, right? But in terms of whether in terms of a library, you know, whether the library has, you know, my books, you know, maybe somebody walks by and can tell what I'm reading. I don't think people care about that. I know it doesn't matter.
I agree. I think especially when you get to an academic library, I think that college student aged patrons, it's not an issue for them at all.
Right, especially generationally, you're right. Yeah, right. But that doesn't matter.
But yeah, well, we need to do better by them anyway.
Yeah.
Well, the 2 thoughts that come to mind immediately are we need to have conversations with the ILS vendors right away. Like, guys, build something into your systems to fix this. And then, of course, the perfect solution is always going to be out of reach monetarily, but the Amazon locker type of thing
I was
where
thinking something
your
about
book is in bin number 6 and the code is this, and no one can see what's in bin number 6 because it's locked. I mean, but libraries don't have the space and the money to pull that off, probably.
I don't. An open hold shelf takes up a lot of space. It requires a different kind of space than you might have currently behind your circ desk or wherever.
Yeah.
So if you can find the space for an open hold shelf, I think you could probably find the space for a locker. But I agree, the money's and also whatever electricity.
Sure.
Especially in older buildings.
The acquisition and installation of that system is going to be 5 figures minimum, maybe 6.
And then they're gonna not know the code anyway, so.
Right. Have to go to the desk to find out the code.
You know, our library cards are the ID cards for the university. So I guess if everyone had a card that had, you know, that you had to slide through and that unlocked it, and only that card could unlock that locker. I'm just got really interested in how we could do that. Sorry.
Go to one kiosk, scan your card, and one door pops open. And that's one of them,
but the expense there, it's just
great. Yeah.
So, I mean, this has been really good. My question is, you know, I certainly think, you know, there's an opportunity here for greater best practices. My question is, what's the appropriate venue for the creation of that best practices? Is that PPC? Thinking of more from a legal perspective, is this something we would maybe perhaps ILA has a best practices committee? You know, I wonder if that's a venue.
I think that should go there.
Yeah, you know, maybe they are the best venue.
And Paul, I think initially, I think that is probably the intent of the Illinois Library Association right now.
Okay.
Is to incorporate something that would be appropriate for all libraries.
Has that been formally, do you know, Greg, has that formally been
Not
presented?
formally, it is in discussed behind the scenes on that issue.
All right. Well,
so I don't want to make a formal pronouncement, but I think that is a possibility with the Library Association.
Well, and it is my opinion. I do think that's a good venue, and I am ex officio on ILA's freedom, so I will certainly vocalize that there too to make that a formal process. This has been really good. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Greg. Thank you all. This was a good conversation.
Of course. Yeah, I have one more thing that Dee wanted me to address which is the vendor issue. And I know Dee talked about this a lot. We've had a lot of questions about this, about the issue of providing patron information to vendors that a library has contracted with to provide, and it could be online services, it could be any kind of, it could be events and activities, installation, signing up for whatever that is. And the library enters into a contract with the vendor, and then as part of that contract shares the patron information so that the vendor can provide services to those patrons. And I know there have been a lot of questions and concerns about that. And while I had bad news on the other issue on that practice, our research on this, and we've advised on any number of contracts, both through Rails and some of the members that are our clients, is for the most part that it doesn't implicate legal issues for a library to share their vendor information that would otherwise be protected under state statute for confidentiality for use for vendor services, because the Act prohibits the publication of that information or making that information available to the public. The public component of that, and this of course is the concern about putting it on a shelf where anyone can see it, because you're making it available to the public. People can see, they can tie the material with the name. But in this case, you as a library are sharing that information with the vendor that you're under contract with, not to publish it, not to make it available to the public, but for that vendor to provide services to those patrons that a patron may sign up for, may log into. And it's not a matter of publicizing this and putting it out for public consumption and public view. That's the legal side of it. I'm very comfortable about that. The things, and this is another best practice, the things that I've advised members in Rails in entering into those contracts are make sure that you have that you've reviewed those contracts and you've put in information, if it's not any already in there, put in a prohibiting them from selling or sharing the patron information and publicizing it and making it available to the public, very clearly putting them on notice of the statutory prohibitions, and that the library isn't contracting with somebody that then would do that. But to the extent that the vendor is using this, I don't see how it would fall into the act. Now, if the vendor took that information and sold it, shared it with other outside third parties that are not part of the same service. And I get that question. Well, oh, it's one vendor that subs out for a part of it. Well, is the subcontracting still within to provide the patron with services and the library? Then it's not being published, so to speak, or made available. It's for the relationship, and the use should be for the library services. But I still think it's good practice to have that in the agreement. So if it's something that they weren't supposed to do, they would be in breach of that contract. You could get out of the contract, and you'd be able to show that, yes, we shared our information with this vendor, but we had protections that they were not supposed to take it to the next step and publicize or sell that information. So I'm much concerned about that. I would say that's just a contracting issue to make sure that the vendors understand what the limits are. But the fact that they use and have access to that information, and you, the library, are providing that to them, is not in furtherance of publicizing it under the act, but very different purposes. Because you collect that information for purposes of processing a card or borrowing or signing up for events that they're operating under that same umbrella. So much less concerns. I don't know if there are any contracts or questions about that, but I know we've had this come up in all aspects, but it typically comes back to how is the vendor using the information that you're sharing with them, as opposed to you're just putting that information out. You are not prohibited from sharing that information. You are prohibited from publicizing it and making it open and a vendor under a good contract with language that limits how they use that and the scope of the use of that information shouldn't implicate the statute, at least from what we've reviewed. Yes. Any questions or issues on that particular issue? I know a lot of people have come up with that.
That came up specifically for us related to Explore More. Our museum pass program, but we were exactly, because of what Julie just said, is not an issue. Just
and I remember that.
Yeah.
They came back and they specifically, we use, how are you using this information? What are you doing with it? And they came back with a bullet point of, we don't share it, we don't sell it. This is how we keep it confidential. And those are the things. Ask the questions. Make sure your contract is clear, and then ask the questions of your vendors.
Thank you, Julie.
So that's what I wanted to talk about. I think Indeed did that cover sort of those were the two big issues that I think that keep coming up the most. And anything sort of a Q&A of anything else that's brewing in this field?
For today, I'm sorry about the bad news, but it's just as well to know it, right?
Yeah, lawyers always have bad news.
No, you almost never give me bad news, but so I forgive you.
No, this was good. This is information we need, and now we're going to find a path forward.
Yep.
To serve our communities well. So this was a conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Hope the weather's better there than it is here.
No, it's
not.
Oh, you're sending it our way. Thanks, guys.
Yes, we are. Right, we are. Literally.
All right.
All right. Well, we will. Bye, Julie.
Bye. Thank you.
We'll move on to the Illinois State Library report. And Greg, thank you again for your graciousness and letting Julie intercede in our agenda there. So.
No, again, thank you. That was a very good and timely discussion. So anyway, so. It's sunny here. I will announce that. So, so I'll be very brief. I want to wish Rails the best of luck on this application for the census grant. What little we had in that, we are excited for you too, and hope that does come to fruition for the system. From the state standpoint, and those of you who are in public libraries may have received your packets already of additional census information that we're just through entity from the federal government on. So there were a number of large packets that were just recently mailed from our office out to public libraries with additional information that you may find useful in disseminating information to your own patrons. Regarding grant programs for FY20, that application may have gone live this afternoon, even, I'm not sure. It's within days, but we were checking on it this morning. It was not yet live. Those applications will be due January 15th of this year. So again, for public libraries, please be looking for that and looking for completion of that by the 15th. You will be addressing your system annual report submission and the audit in a few minutes, and so we'll look forward to reviewing those from each of the 3 library systems and then get back with you all as soon as possible. Any questions? Regarding payments, the $1.5 million that Jim mentioned, that could possibly again write tonight or be issued tonight to the library system. If not, certainly on Monday or Tuesday a week. We are still looking or working very closely with the Secretary's Budget Office and they with the State Comptroller's Office on assuring that the release of the final FY19 payments are made to the library systems. And we still do have some actually public library per capita grant last year that still have not received their funding as well. So those are just a few items of note, and I will let you continue with your meeting unless you have questions.
Any questions for Greg? If not, thank you, Greg, for your report. We have we have made it to new business, and we have the, as Greg actually foreshadowed for us, we have the annual audit for FY19. And actually, Jim, would you like to introduce this topic?
Yes, we've received our audit report, both the annual financial report and the single audit report, which from Sickage. And we have Dan Berg, who is the audit partner at Burr Ridge. I believe he's there. I thought I heard him to make a presentation on it. But the process went very well, as it always does, and a very good year, especially compared to prior ones. We did very well. Dan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Jim. I have the best news I'm allowed to give. That we once again the same opinion that the system has been accustomed to receiving. It's commonly referred to as a clean opinion. We call it an unmodified opinion. I would strongly recommend, if you haven't had a chance to review this report, to start with Jim's management discussion and analysis. It's 8 pages. Some of it is boilerplate, but most of it is a comparison between last year and this year, and it does give a great deal of analysis as to why things changed, mostly for the better. As Jim said, it was a pretty good year financially. On page 4 of the audit, the statement of net position now shows $26.5 million of net position. Of that, $2 million is spoken for in the form of net investment in capital assets. $2 million, almost 7, is related to IMRF, and the remaining $21.7 million is available for future use. I did want to point out that there was a fairly dramatic change in the system's IMRF. Net pension, now it's a liability. Last year it was an asset. And the asset last year, if you're following along at home or in Coal Valley or whatever. On page 21, it shows the change in the pension liability or asset, a $6.2 million asset this year. It's a $600,000 liability. For the last several years, the system has had an asset. If you remember, December 31st, 2018 was a investment measurement. And that directly affects the net pension liability, or the net pension liability. The liability actually went down $250,000, but because of the lack of investment earnings at that measure, that change is smoothed out over a period of 4 years by the use of amortizing. On page 22, we show that we have a deferred outflow of resources of $3.7 million, and that's going to be amortized over the next. The Government Accounting Standards Board tries to take these roller coasters of Gesundheit, of the measurement into account, but it still causes some fluctuation in your net asset and net. As Jim alluded to over on page 6 of the report, we're showing an increase in fund balance of over $4 million. The fund balance in the general fund is now $16 million, and we still have $2.6 million in the cap projects. And over on page 8, you can see that play out. There was $350,000 of capital project expenditures, which reduced that from nearly 3 million down to the 2.6. I did want to point out one other thing, and that's that last year the system and all other June 30 year ends were required to implement GASB statement number 75, which related to other post-employment benefits. We needed the system to create a baseline, if you will, by hiring an actuary and determining what that liability would be. It turned out to be only $77,000. So we recorded that last year, but during the course of this year's audit, management and we agreed, decided that was immaterial. So going forward, we're going to use that 77 as a baseline and just measure materiality against that to make sure that we don't need to record it. Should assets drop by $25 million or so, that would become material. And we would need the system to record it again. But for the foreseeable future, we think that'll be immaterial. That going forward, we will see, we'll talk about it every year with the system, and that's pretty much it. We would also like to direct your attention to the board communication in the separate, I'm sorry, did anybody have any annual financial report? Okay. The board communication is about as thin as it can be because we had no adjusting journal entries. We had no material weaknesses and deficiencies that we are required to report to the board. Every year there's an item or two that we discuss with staff and ask certain questions and try to make sure that operationally and in terms of needing to disclose those to the board. So congratulations to staff on that. And then the last item is the single audit. The system spent $1.9 million of federal money through the per capita grant, the portion that was funded by the federal, and we had, once again, no findings, no question costs in that process either. So it was a very smooth audit with very little to report to the board other than the financial results. And we thank staff, especially Sharon and Bill and Jim, for being as cooperative and ready for us as they can be. It has gone very smooth the last few years, and we greatly appreciate their work in getting ready for us and their responsiveness once we arrive on site. Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you, Dan. Does any, just before we lose Dan, this is your big opportunity. If not, I would like to thank Jim and his team and Sharon who's here in the building for another fabulous year.
Yep.
Managing the system's finances. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So if I remember correctly, now that first we have the report, we merely accept the report. Yes. So may I have a motion to approve? Let me get my wording here correctly. Accept, yes. May I have a motion to approve? I really want to say approve, don't I? Accept. We will accept. May I have a motion to accept the annual 2019.
So moved.
Thank you. And we'll not say the other A word again, since I seem to really like it for this motion. Any further discussion? Emily, can we do a roll call for this, please?
Sue Busenberg.
Yes.
Michael Campbell.
Yes.
Ellie Cox.
Yes.
Selena Gomez-Beloy. Yes. Diane Hollister.
Yes.
Jay Caston.
Yes.
Sarah McComb Chase.
Yes.
Paul Mills.
Yes.
Scott Poynton.
Yes.
Dee Reynolds.
Yes.
Nadia Shake.
Do we?
She said yes.
Did you?
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And thank you again, Dan. Thank you. And I hope you have a safe, incident-free trip home with all the weather you're having there.
It is a lot of fun driving the highways and byways today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, moving along, we have membership changes, some new members, and with somebody doing that presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the line and talk real briefly about each of these. And then you can, if you want to talk about one, just let me know at the end. So we have 4 changes. They're all additions. So the first one is Community Consolidated School to South Village, which is south of Glenwood, Linwood area, right on the Indiana-Illinois border. This district represents 3 libraries, a junior high and 2 elementary schools. I met with Danielle Baker, who's the new director of library services there, and she gave me a tour of them. They are continuing education systems, and then of course being eligible for grants. The next one that I have is Peru Elementary School District 124. That's in Peru, Illinois. That is just 2 schools, a middle school and an elementary school. But the librarian there, Beth Hickey, she also works part-time at the Peru Rails. And she knew about continuing education. She knew about L2. So she was excited to bring the district into Rails. The third one is a little bit of the outlier. That's the Jacksonville Correctional Center, but I thought you'd all be interested about that because of our recent discussions on serving Correctional Center. Constance Lee is the librarian there, and she came from Illinois Heartland, where she was at the Robinson Correctional Center. And so she had brought the Robinson Correctional Center into IHLS, and now she wanted to bring Jacksonville Correctional Center into Rails, which is fantastic. They serve the library 30 hours a week, and she was very excited about doing continuing education through Rails and getting training, things like that. Yes, Scott?
Dan, do you happen to know what the prison population is there at that center?
I don't,
roughly,
actually. Sorry about that.
Sure.
I know that it's a minimum security facility, but I don't remember getting a number on that.
Okay, the library building is not
Pretty high, and they get a lot of that from donations.
Yeah.
And she was really interested in connecting with public libraries for donations. So, yeah, thank you for asking about that. And then the last one is the most recent one. This is Central Stickney School, District 110. It's I met with the librarian, Paulina Bednark, on Tuesday. Actually, this was kind of the late edition. But they are really interested in continuing educations and then, of course, grants as well. Does anyone have any questions about any of these?
No, but I just looked up.
Dan, just a comment.
Go. Sarah started. Let's
I
start with
just
Sarah.
looked at the correctional center's population, and it can house up to a little over 1,600.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jay, you had a comment, sir?
According to Google, it's about 1,100 in that section right there.
Well, it's a library board meeting. anyone have any further questions for
Thank you, Dave.
Does anyone have any further questions for Dan? I will note I had looked it up too. So anyway, yes, I did. Look, to approve the schools for full membership in Rails as presented and request final approval from the Illinois State Library.
So moved. Second.
Michael and I think Sue. All right. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Approved. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. All right. Moving right along. We have revised charges.
You know-
Did I forget something?
Point of order.
Uh-oh.
I would say that you said schools specifically.
Did I say schools?
Which I know, yes.
Yeah,
which
well, that's
if
true. I
There
was
was also, so I think you do correctional.
That's fine. I was just reading our
I
template
know.
one. I know,
I
it's
know.
okay. So let's redo that. May I have a motion to approve the 4 libraries for full membership in Rails as presented and request final approval from the Illinois State Library?
So moved.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you again, Sue. Any further? Yes, no, that is a very good catch. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are still approved, which is good. And actually,
You changed your mind.
I'm very happy about the Jacksonville Corrections Center.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
really
Yeah.
wonderful librarian there, both at first the Heartland facility. All right, moving along, we have revised charges for both the Resource Sharing Committee and the Consortia Committee, and Jane will be presenting that.
And you have the proposed changes as well as a cover memo in your packet. So just to summarize, first of all, for the Consortia Committee, we have included the Link-In Consortium, which is actually an interlibrary loan consortium versus a shared catalog consortium. That's been included in our Consortia Committee for since it formed. It's never really been a great fit for them because they're very loosely organized versus our other our shared catalog consortium. And that difference has been increased since we revised the Consortia Committee charge to be more focused and move the general resource sharing. So after discussion with Betsy Adamowski, who's been our contact, and she contacted the other directors in Lincoln, we are recommending that we simply remove the Interlibrary Loan Consortium from the charge of the Consortia Committee.
Thank you, Jane.
Individually or at once?
I think we can do both if there's no objections to that. Does anyone have any questions for Jane at this point on either recommended changes to the charges of these 2 committees? If not, may I have a motion to accept the recommendation of charges for these committees, specifically denote the Resource Sharing Committee and the Consortia Committee? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll second it. Nadia.
Sarah, you want, all right, well, Nadia, yes, we'll give that to Nadia. Thank you, Sarah. Gracious of you. Any further conversation about these 2 charges? Not all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The revised charges are approved. Thank you, Jane. Thank you for your presentation. Moving right along to 8.4, the annual report, and Deirdre will be discussing this.
Yes, thank you. Our annual report, along with the annual audit, is due to the State Library on September 30th. So this report is in response to well, it's a requirement of the State Library that we find that it is actually in the format of the area per capita grant, because that is what we are responding to. It's not as perhaps easy to follow along as it is with our strategic plan because of the, it's not organized by goals, but nevertheless, it is for fiscal year. I guess I would just draw your attention to a few things on page 3. You'll see under objectives, communicate benefits of Rails membership to academic school and special push. pushing out the, the information about rail services to all of our different library types. I would also, on page 6, there the My Library Is campaign, which, as you know, is very popular among all types of libraries. On page 7, the goal of providing excellent stewardship. You've just heard a good example of that, the great work that's done by our financial department. Let's see, on page 8, down near the bottom, the long-term plan to optimize the number and location of Rails buildings and delivery hubs. We're in the midst of that right now, even though that's an ongoing project. On the next page, the objective about the Rails board being engaged and knowledgeable. We think we heard back from our new board members in particular how much you enjoyed, I guess, or found useful the orientation session. So, we're going to continue to tweak that, but, certainly we feel like that's really has been going very well. On page 11, we talk about explore more related to resource sharing. Obviously, there's, as I always say, there's been a lot going on. It's a very, I think we're a very productive, highly productive organization in that we really do a lot of things for our members. And this report is just proof of that, I guess. Let's see, page 19, e-read, we continue to work on that, and that and biblio boards, these are very important projects for sharing resources. And for me, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's a lot to take in, but it's also in one place, all the things that you hear about all year long, more or less. So
it's very thorough.
Yes. Thanks to Mary Witt, who wrote most of it, who's not here. All that construction out there, But in any case, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
We have any questions for Deirdre? If not, may I have a motion to approve the narrative report of the annual report? Second. Thank you, Tom. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further conversation on this report? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Sorry, thank you. We now move on to Service of the Month, the Find More Illinois update, which will be Jane.
And I'm going to show you a few slides and then actually do a very brief online demo. This definitely will not delve into every aspect of the system, but just will give you a particular. So I need to share some of my slides here. So those of you that are outside should be seeing my cover slide for Find More Illinois. Thank you, Dan.
It sounds like drilling.
Right.
We're having
At first I thought it was the camera moving.
Get oil that.
So here's Find More Illinois in a nutshell. It lets people search multiple Illinois library catalogs all at once. And anyone can search. You don't need to have a library card or be logged in or anything. Anybody can search. For participating libraries, both the patrons and the staff interlibrary requests and manage them. So benefits of the system beyond that, seamless discovery and delivery. So our tagline is find it, click it, get it, to lead to better interlibrary loan service and efficiencies. We worked with our vendor on graphics to develop support for reciprocal borrowing service. That's currently in testing. That was recently developed. That will enable participating libraries just to get a quick check of reciprocal borrowers who show up, check, you know, is that patron in good standing at his or her home library, with passing minimal information for patron privacy, which is basically, yes, they're okay, or no, there's a problem here you might need to look into. Additional benefits, the system does offer records, catalog records for libraries that want to do that. It's flexible enough to allow even non-automated libraries to participate by attaching their holdings to existing records. We don't currently have that, but hope to make that available to libraries. And as the project grows more and more, we want this to become an OCLC alternative, again, for libraries that want one. It doesn't preclude using OCLC, but a lot of libraries would like to have an alternative. It is not at all designed, that always remains the first place we want the patron to go. It's not designed to replace the consortial catalog, but it is there to provide either for a standalone system, the sort of second level, and for a consortial catalog, the third level of looking for a book, and also use other interlibrary loan providers beyond that. So I'm gonna escape out of there. We do have a website, findmoreillinois.org, including a map of the participating libraries. These are the libraries that are already live, and a list. We have one academic library currently, University of Illinois in Chicago, a number of public libraries, and school libraries that open. This little stack icon represents the catalogs that are connected. Some of these are currently still in implementation, but we've already got them connected. 4 of our 6 LSAPs connected. We've got Prairie Cat, Rock River, RSA, and we just brought up our first Swan library. So as soon as one library in a consortium connects, we get results from the entire catalog. Because of the way their system is set up, it only brings back the results from that one library. And then we have, as you can see, a number of standalone libraries there as well. By default, everything is checked. Phoenix is still in implementation. Searching is, of course, by keyword. So I'm just going to do a quick search here. Actually, I'm going to log in first in the interest of time. I'm going to log in as a test patron at Sterling Public Library. As I do that, the system actually does a check against the patron database to validate that patron and make sure that he or she is in good standing. And you can see that I'm logged in now. As a quick search, watch the screen up around this area in the upper right. It's going out to all those catalogs and doing a live search against them. It's best to group similar things together. Of course, that depends on the cataloging as well. So you can see with the City of Girls here, it's got audiobook player, book, ebook, and some large print. As I drill down, it shows me more. I keep drilling down. I get a list of where to find it. This is RSA. So for those libraries, those are signified by this yes under willing to lend. But we can see it's returning live results from the catalog, so we get shelf status as well. Patron doesn't need to worry about picking any particular library. We get additional details through our subscription to Baker and Taylor's Content Cafe. And for some books, there are also Goodreads reviews. So since I'm logged in, system automatically pulls together the bibliographic information about the book as well as the patron's information. And again, we have minimal patron information that's brought over just for patron privacy. Click submit. And it comes back, ILL request, your request 4406, that's a sequential number. What happens behind the scenes is the software is automatically checking to see what library it's available with. It's actually repeating the search, so it may be looking beyond even RSA. It will build a list of potential libraries that have the book available one at a time until a library fills it. It then, goes into delivery, gets sent to the patron's home library, and goes on from there. That's Find More Illinois in a nutshell. Of course, there's a behind-the-scenes staff side of things, which I'm not going to see more thorough now. I have a in-person presentation at Burr Ridge on October 2nd, and webinars on October 14th and November 6th. Webinars are recorded, so if you're interested but can't make either of those dates, sign up on L2 and then do the recorded webinar. Any questions?
I guess I have questions about how many items are being borrowed this way in the state right now.
This is still fairly small, so as we build it more and more, and especially as we bring in more standalone libraries, we do expect that to increase.
And then there's, I mean, you probably go into this in the webinar, but there's gonna be processing time of some sort.
Yes.
On each library end. What kind of materials are going on this way right now?
Mostly books.
Like popular reading or?
Yeah, it's like most of our participants are public libraries, so it's been mostly, I would say, popular materials.
Thank you.
Other?
Thank you, Jane. I would like to just reiterate, because it's my job, that this is, particularly, I think one of the reasons that we have done this, have created this, or worked with Autographics to do this is for standalone libraries. And I guess I'm looking at you, Ryan and Michael, for public libraries. I mean, this is a great solution for your libraries if you don't choose to join a consortium.
Mm-hmm.
It's very user-friendly, as you can see, and the more that we build this, the more robust it becomes. It is a great alternative to OCLC for sure, and will one day, I absolutely believe, will be a replacement for OCLC, a more expensive and more user-friendly replacement.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for that presentation. We now move on to the Census 2020 grant application, which Deirdre had touched upon earlier,
Yes.
but was there anything else you'd like to share?
No,
ma'am?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if we get this grant, you will definitely be hearing a lot more of it.
We'll hear one way or the other about it, whether you get the grant.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
That is a short timeline that you mentioned.
Yes, it's
so
very short. Yes.
I like the word compressed. That's-
Yes. Aggressive also goes to mind.
All right, well, we're actually on to Rails. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I'm not,
Oh,
my
yes.
library isn't in that.
Right, it's a statewide program. And when I was at Moline yesterday, I was talking to Dee and some of her colleagues and their director. And yes, there are, if you go to the IDA and if you're interested in finding out for your library if your library could work with, and it doesn't have to be a public library by any means. You were contacted, I know. That's the place to find out who the potential.
All right. Thank you again. We actually now move on to Rails board member reports. And do any of our board members have anything they'd like to share? What's going on at your library?
Well, we're
Jay
having our
Burrid.
annual.
Go ahead, Jay.
We had to limit registration to 100. It's for children 2 to 8, have to be accompanied by an adult. And they capped it at 100 registrations because that would be the child and an adult. So 200 people total. And we did receive one comment that the library director forwarded to the police department. Other than that, it seems to be well received within the community.
I guess. That's great.
Drag queen story.
Yeah.
In Minneapolis, and it was great.
Great, yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sue, you had.
Well, a little bit more on the conservative side. We're having our annual, October 26th. This year, we're having a gentleman named Bill Steinberg, and he's going to do songs of Frank Sinatra and more. And it includes a meal and the entertainment. And so, Kiwanee Public Library, October 26th.
Sue.
Yep.
The White Oak Library District, the day after our August meeting, held our third annual Dog Days of Summer event. We think this is the only event of its type in the country, but anyways, it's a pet adoption, pet rescue event.
How'd the dogs do?
Good. So we have over 40 rescues show up with animals that can be adopted, and then over 30 different vendors of just pet type of items on site. And then people are encouraged to bring their dog, barking and meeting one another, and many pets get adopted that day, and now we're starting to have people come back in subsequent years with dogs that they adopted in previous years to show them off.
That's wonderful.
Harry Potter, celebrity dog. So he just sits in little cars or little fire engines or whatever, and they pull him around with little costumes on. He was a huge hit. But
yes.
Yeah, it's one of our staff members. It's her baby, and she let her. It's
fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you have a new dog?
The cat will not allow that.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Anything else anyone would like to share? Yes, Tom.
We did open to them. Everybody likes the renovations we've made so far, so it was a good way to get the summer reading folks to contribute to that, so that worked out really well as well. And if I could do a commercial plug, we are looking for a new library director. This is retiring at the end of the year, so if anybody wants to move to the gracious Central Illinois.
we're in Bloomington Public, we're deeply involved with the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program. And Bradley is in the thick of banned books. I work at Bradley also, and that's always just such a fascinating. Bob Doyle put out a book every years, but I think our last one was like 2010 or 2011. Has anyone taken up the gauntlet? And
Not that I'm aware of.
okay, I just wonder what's going
He
to
up and
become of
retired.
that. Resource,
Yeah.
with so many controversial books.
I have a title that I think he gave us, and it wasn't as far back as 2010. It was what, 2015
Yeah,
or
there are newer
2016.
ones. He didn't retire till 15 or 16.
Yeah, I remember the exact title, but it's Bob's. So.
Okay. This last one.
Yeah, there are definitely newer editions than 2010, but
Okay.
it did stop at one point.
Yeah.
We just don't have it in our collection. I looked for it the other day. And then the last thing,
I'll look
with the
for it in my
Bloomington
office
Public.
and I'll try to bring it for you.
And then with the Bloomington Public Library and the museum, McLean County Museum, they've been working in tandem, and I think I mentioned last time about the Lincoln, Illinois Route 66. Okay, well, now the museum's celebrating their 25th cemetery walk, and it's so the library has been hosting speakers, and it's coming up next weekend, so it's a weekend that's really very active. I love it.
Yeah, I've
You
been
know,
on that
you can
cemetery
become
walk. It's
emotional.
wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're very good. That's it.
Great.
Thank you, Diane. Any other reports anyone would like to share? No, if not, all right. We're moving on to agenda building for our next meeting, which will be Friday, October 25th, which is right after the Illinois Library Association annual conference. One thing actually, Deirdre and I hope to be speaking with the Heartland Library System and also their president to discuss further, explore the idea of having a joint board meeting. So we will certainly have a report on that after we have that meeting. Exciting things coming up, Rails quarterly consortium reports, which I find exciting since we come out of our committee.
We'll be meeting at New Lenox.
Yes, New Lenox.
And for the meeting, and you'll be getting an invitation, if you haven't already, there will be a farewell and celebration for Jane, who is retiring on November 15th. So you'll be hearing more about that, but please plan to attend in New Lenox.
Yes. All right. If there's nothing further for the next month's agenda, I'm not hearing anything. Thank you all for joining us on this rainy day, and we will adjourn this meeting at 2:52 p.m. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thank you.